here at Raid Shadow Legends. Welcome to the video. It's going to be a good one today, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Sending some love, some positive vibes your way, especially if you need them out there today. Hey, guys, we're going to do... I've actually been wanting to make a video like this for a long time now. I want to look back at the first tier list that I can find, including all the legendaries in the game, not just like the top 5, because I want to see who the bad ones were too back in the day, and I kind of want to react to it, and I also want to do a little bit of a where are they now, you know, some of the old school, the OG champions in the game. The tier list that I found was by a creator who some of you may know, may remember. It's been only a few months since he stopped covering or stopped making content. Is Chosen Brad, or Chosen. He had the first tier list that I could find out there. I will say, we talk about the OG champions in the game a lot here on the channel. This is not exactly the OG. The first batch of champions in Raid, it didn't even have like any of the Void Legos that you got, like Arbiter, for example. Didn't have any of them, right? So very early on, before even the first major patch in the game, they added a lot, right? Even the dungeons, like there was no Fire Knight, there was no Ice Golem, there was no 6-star artifacts. Even at the time of this recording of the video that we're going to react to, there was no 6-star artifacts. There was no, yeah, so like a lot didn't exist back then. It was a different day. There was no fusions, for example, in the game.
No, it was the Stone Age. But folks, actually...
Anyway, guys, I digress. Let's cut right to the video to react. A big shout out to Chosen. He did give me permission, obviously, to include this in the video, in my video, to react to this content. So let's get to it. You're so small, Chosen. You're so small.
A lot more time on than I would like to admit. It was a very daunting task to go through every single legendary and constantly shuffle them around and reorder them and kind of rank them one by one all the way through the list. And but I got it done, and this is kind of my first final version. I plan on keeping it up to date and doing my best to kind of keep it fresh. If there's ever like balancing or
the grandfather of spreadsheet.
I have a grandfather?
In rankings in Raid.
Patches or things that change in the game, I will try to keep this up to date and current. So that's why I have the last updated thing there. And you can find this down in the video description. So
you guys can already peek and see like a lot. I love how he just like reveals the entire list. There's no lead up. He just gives you the main course right there.
Those were some great times.
Look at this whenever you would like. If you pull legendary or one of your friends does or something and you're curious on what I think about them, then you can pull this up and have it at your fingertips. So yeah, let's kind of go over this. You know, for number 1, in my opinion, it used to always be Bad Alcazar. But the more that I play the game,
I love how he's like, it used to always be when they're like literally a few months old, the game, right?
I've just gotten to a point where I think Martyr is ridiculously broken. Let me pull up Martyr here. Sacred Order, I think she's hands down.
Remember when they didn't have any gaps between the champions, right?
I was learning.
On the most valuable legendary in the game to have. A1 is a 45% chance of placing a 60%.
So I'm gonna mute him a little bit in the background, but yeah, Martyr was the champion. I mentioned this before. Some of you OGs out there, you know what I'm talking about too. Everybody wanted to get their hands on Martyr in the beginning of Raid Shadow Legends. She was everybody's #1 on all the early tier lists. I mean, honestly, people were focused on Clan Boss, right? She has the decreased defense, she has the decreased attack, she has the defensive aura, she has the increased defense, right? I mean, she brings so much to the table. So, and even in wave content in the early game, she could just deal with everything, with the provoke, with the counterattack as well. She has so much in her kit. And again, like even with the decreased defense on the A1, the versatility that she brings to the table and that defensive aura. I mean, he said it. She's like, she's just straight up broken, is what he said, right? She does not feel that way nowadays. Obviously, she's never been buffed, never been touched. I don't think there's been anything ever done to Martyr at all. I feel like nowadays she's still pretty good. Like she's still solid, but she's not in anybody's top 50, top 10 at least. Let's just say top 10, top 20. So certainly not anybody's #1 champion in the game. How times have changed in the Wixwell era and even predating that, obviously. But man, she was where it was at back in the day. Let's see who he has at number 2 here.
After we get past Martyr, we've obviously got the god tier legendaries, in my opinion. Bad Alcazar, a ridiculous all-around support that's kind of useful everywhere. Zavia, same. She's a DPSer, hits really hard, is good against the clan boss, can use her everywhere. Arbiter, probably the best arena team leader in the game, and is just an amazing support in general. But yeah, So I'll kind of, I don't need to go through all of these one by one.
Well, I will, Chosen. Well, I will 5 years later, brother. So, first of all, Bad Alcazar, I mean, my man Chosen made his whole channel avatar, Bad Alcazar, right? But BEK Killa, yeah, he used to be up there too. As Chosen referenced, he was #1 in some people's books, and then Martyr kind of came around and pushed him around. But with that malice ability on Bad Alcazar, he's still a boss. He's still a very good, similar to Martyr, I would say, right? Still a very good champion, maybe even slightly more to use than Martyr nowadays. I don't know. But back in the day, I mean, that cleanse, the heal, the extra damage against poison and the poisons, he was the GOAT. I was actually surprised that he has Xayvia as #3. Man, I don't remember people being that high on Xayvia. He mentions you can use her everywhere. You could use her in Fire Knight as a triple hitter option. The poison and the deny revival. Again, I have nothing against Xayvia. I just don't remember her being like that highly desired. #3 in the game. And then he mentions Arbiter, and he doesn't mention the rest. So Arbiter being there is not a shocker at all. She's still awesome. Ray is #5. Oh man, I do remember people loving Ray back in the day. And again, I think it's hard to say she's a notch below. I was going to say she's a notch below Bad Alcazar and Martyr nowadays, but she's just so different, right? She's still got a decent kit with the AoE on every ability, the control, the extra damage, the decreased defense on the A1. You can still use her in a stun set or just straight out, blender comp or something like that. So she's definitely a champion that I've been using more, ironically, recently with Curse City being a thing in the game. And then we have Sir Nick, Prince Kymar, Biggin, and Lysandra. Those are his god tiers. Biggin was my first legendary, guys. This dude's still a monster. I love him, but he's certainly not a top 10 champion in the game anymore, right? Power creep is real, as you can see by this list. But yeah, Biggin is still awesome. He's got a lot of control. He's still just a fun champion. Can still put out a lot of damage, too, overall with 3 AoEs. Similar, I guess, in some ways to Ray. I guess the only guy on this entire list you could make an argument nowadays. I didn't have him on my personal top 10, but I feel like you could make a really strong argument that he is a top 10 champion, is Prince Kymar. So, hey, man, congratulations, Prince Kymar. You stood the test of time. You stood the test of time, Kymar.
I feel good. These guys didn't offer me much competition.
And then we have Lysandra, a top 10. Lysandra, I mean, there's so many more options in the game right now, right? Like, the first one that came to mind is Shuzhen, the Valorous. But, I could keep going and going and going and going. Lysandra's still solid, still one of the queens of speed in the game, but certainly not a top 9 god tier champion. He has Rashkar the Tower, Fushan, Longbeard, and then Warlord. After Longbeard, Fushan, and Rashkar.
Is just an amazing support in general. But yeah, so I'll kind of, I don't need to go through all of these one by one. We'd have.
He had Venus at like 18 too, and she was still really good back then.
We'd have quite the video on our hand. And what's funny is, you'll see down here in the terrible, we've got War Mother, a pretty infamous one. She's really bomb reliant, and bombs, I think they should be reworked how they scale. I think that the bomb damage should scale with like a combination of HP and attack. Like you'll see some characters have an ability that scales with attack and defense, like Executioner. I think bombs should scale off both attack and HP. That way you can kind of build yourself a lot better.
That's a very interesting idea that hasn't aged that poorly. I was like, oh boy, Chosen has an idea about bombs back in the day. What is he going to say? But it's actually not a bad one. Now 5 years later here, bombs still are not really a thing, a bit more than they were back then with Nishak and whatnot, but still not like a meta viable strategy outside of like Bommel Reflect or something, or Stone Skin Arena.
My highest ranked legendary is actually Foley. So I do have one top.
Oh, okay, so Foley is 25. That's his highest ranked legendary back in the day.
Top 25 legendary. I did crack that boat. Finally, with the fusion, I was able to get Foley. So I know a lot of people were curious because of the event where I would rank Foley, and he came in the, I think most of the
So they have Sir Nick and Foley in the game, obviously, by the rankings. So they must have been just finishing their second fusion ever on this video. So right after that first update that introduced Sir Nick into the game.
Plarium does a pretty good job. I think they designed a great game, and I am a moderator of theirs, so I love Plarium and all the people I've worked with and talked to, but I do think, you know, they don't do everything perfect. I think legendaries are very poorly balanced. You know, in my opinion, it would be pretty easy to jump in and kind of change some numbers.
I think it's very interesting here, guys. Just some observations. And I remember this back in the day. First of all, by the way, this is not like a knock got chosen a million years ago. We just started playing the game and everything, and no one knew anything back then, right? But I did find it interesting that he ranked Martyr as #1 in the game and Valkyrie at number 22 in the game, you know? My recollection was that they were both top 5 champions back in the day, but this is maybe right before Valkyrie really emerged, you know, as the other counterattack champion, that great shield and the jealousy passive. He has Turvold at 18. He has Queen Ava ahead of those. Razin at 19. He has Errol as a good. He has Lugan the Steadfast, Mortu Macabre, Inithwi Blood Twin, Cupid is Ghostborn, Lord Champfort, Drexstar Blood Twin, Blind Seer, Krutraxa, and then at the very bottom of the good category, he has Mashald and Dracomorph right before, right at 42 and 43, or 43 and 44. That's an interesting one because some of you OGs out there remember that Dracomorph used to be really bad, right? Really bad. He didn't have an AoE decrease defense and weaken. I think it was or maybe he did it with the weak versions. His kit it was just like a really, really small shell of what it was or what it is now. And Mashald was widely considered to be, for a while there, one of the absolute worst legendaries inside the game. They did a big rework on Tornado. It was nothing like this before, and now they added the extra turn, the True Fear, and the Leech on all enemies. So Mashald is quite a bit better. But yeah, this is before their first initial and big buffs. But the thing that actually, I guess where I want to end this video, guys, is, and let me know if you like this, I will do a reaction to the first rare and the first epic tier list too, if this video does well, if you guys enjoy it. But I want to look at the very bottom of this list, and what strikes me, this is kind of a tragedy, not to be negative here, but a lot of the champions on the bottom are still kind of the champions on the bottom, and they've never really been addressed or buffed in any way. I say this all the time. I want to be cautious because it's easy to advocate that every champion in the game should be buffed and every champion in the game should be the best. I don't feel that way, but I do feel like they could do some little fine tune-ups along the way a little bit more frequently. That would be my personal preference. It's clearly not the direction they've chosen to take the game because they do, like, you know, a couple legendaries a month if we're lucky. Anyway, they have the worst champion in the game is Astrolith. Then he has Solus, Gurgo the Augur, Angar, War Chief, Tomb Lord, and War Mother. I would say, and then if you keep reading above that, I'll let you guys do that. They're all just kind of meh still. You know, Richtof, Cythalia, Bloodgorge by Stophis, Robar, right? I mean, they're just kind of, they're still to this day, all of these champions, with a massive exception of Tomb Lord. In Solus, I would say, is not the second worst. You know, he had a really good buff too. But a lot of them are still like kind of meh. You know, Angar, I feel like they did a good job on his buff. Astrolith too.
You have come a long way, baby.
But the rest, I feel like, you know, they could step in and give a little bit of tune-ups to these old school champions, right? That have gotten power crept a lot with new difficult content and a lot more champions that do what they do only a little bit better. So guys, let me know if you enjoyed this look back into another era of Raid Shadow Legends, with a massive shout out to, again, to Chosen Brad. I'll have Chosen Plays his YouTube channel linked if you guys want to do a deep dive on any of these early tier lists as well. Thank you for watching, and as always, take care, guys.